Alberta, good evening to all of you. Invite others so that with one topic that some of you have always wanted to, one topic that a lot of you have always been interested in. Something happened yesterday, and I wish to speak about it. I'm not feeling too well, but I have to speak about it. It's a very, very interesting historical topic that's going to take us all through the very genesis of our history. So it is really very important that a lot of persons get to be aware of it, and those who will be joining us or are part of the program already should pay keen attention, very keen attention. All right, because it is what you will use to defend yourself. So it's more of like I'm trying to re-equip my followers on the historical debate that concerns Ile-Ife and the Benin people. Alright? That has to emphasis will be placed so much on Ekaranderan. So I would I'll crave the indulgence of the people to stick around. It's strictly a very historical class. Let's talk about some aspect of our history. Let's talk about some of the problems that were created by Jacob Oduduwa. And we have to admonish his great contributions. We also have to criticize his negative influence on our history, while also taking positivity out of doing the first job for the historiography of the Edo people. So it's really very important that. Okay. Anyway, okay. Let's quickly run through today's edition of history class. The Ekaranderan story is very, very interesting topic that we should speak about, as written by someone already posted it, Princess. It's Odomori Osae. Someone already posted his name, Odomori. Odomore. Odomori and Osae, Osarenroen, Osae. The story of Ekaranderan is a very interesting topic. One of the most intriguing and most interesting topic that foreign historians or neighboring our neighbors wants to obliterate from the very canals of our history. You know, I've never seen where a people is so fixated on another man's story. I can't remember the last time the Benin tried to tell the Yoruba people their story. I can't remember the last time the Benin people tried to tell the Yoruba people their own story, or Balufon, or whatever their names are. I can't remember the last time. I can't remember we ever at any point of history we have ever done that. Then I don't understand the fuck where a people who are so fixated on other people's history. There was a relationship between, in the time past, there was a relationship at the time past that has to do where two different tribal group had interaction. All right, the one of the other tribe is trying to say, oh, you tribe, this is not your story. This is how your story should be. This is not who you are. What you said you are is not who you are. This is who you are. I have never seen that stupid nonsense temerity from these Yoruba people. The Benins have never been fixated on any Yoruba people's history. It is not, we are not interested. Who done big, done big. We are not interested. But some aspect of our history that needed clarity was clarified. Some part of our history that was fallaciously written by our earliest historian was not being corrected. The Yorubas are saying that we don't have rights to correct the aspect of our history that was not correct. That's what they are telling us. They are actually saying that no, for the fact that this is what Jacob Oduduwa Ekaranderan wrote, and this is what he wrote. If that is what he wrote, you don't have any other history for you people to write again. So everything he wrote is everything you must have to believe. Alright? Everything that Jacob Oduduwa Ekaranderan wrote is your history. You don't have any right to say that what he wrote is wrong. They are saying that Jacob Oduduwa Ekaranderan is the alpha and omega of the Benin history because he was the first indigenous writer. So it is unquestionable that Benin people, one are the question on our person when write history. So every other history that does not agree with Ekaranderan's submission, alright, any other history that does not agree with Ekaranderan's submission is revisionism. That is what they call it. That is revisionism. Once every historians that have started to write to counter Ekaranderan's work, that started to publicly publish works in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s cannot be correct because Ekaranderan has already written all the history of the Edo people. That is what they are saying. That is what they are inherently telling us, that Ekaranderan already write in our history. Make una not write anything about Benin history. Anything una write now, na zero, na nonsense. That's what they are telling us. That's what they are telling us. But not minding the fact that these same people, their first historian was Samuel Johnson, who published a book in 1921 called The History of the Yoruba People. He said that the Yorubas came from Mecca, that they migrated from Mecca. These are the same people. I want people to open our minds to grasp the stupidity of these people, or some of these people. Don't forget, Samuel Johnson, when he published his work in 1921, The History of the Yoruba People, he said that the Yoruba people came from Mecca. Alright? They did not say that because Samuel Johnson was the first indigenous historian that wrote something about the Yoruba history, that makes that his historical work is insurmountable. Is insurmountable. They didn't say that. You are asking the Benin people because the first indigenous writer of the Benin people, is Jacob Oduduwa Ekaranderan, to believe everything that he wrote, that outside Jacob Oduduwa Ekaranderan's work, every other thing is revisionism. So when they tell you that, also tell them that Samuel Johnson said, their first indigenous writer also said, that they came from Mecca. So every other thing that the Yoruba people write after Samuel Johnson is also wrong. And it does not bind on the Yoruba people. Because that has to be the case. You cannot, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. I mean, what is good for the geese is good for the gander. How did they speak that English? Alright? You want us to believe everything that the Garewa wrote. As our first indigenous writer, you said that everything outside what Jacob Garewa wrote is amount to revisionism. Then the Benins now also telling you now that everything that Samuel Johnson wrote about Yoruba history is absolutely correct. Anything outside Samuel Johnson's work that he said that you people came from Mecca, it even make the entire argument correct. If you say we should believe what Egarewa wrote, and Samuel Johnson wrote before Egarewa, it therefore means that and Johnson said that they came from Mecca, that Oduduwa came from Mecca. If Oduduwa came from Mecca, so Oduduwa is not a Yoruba person. So it therefore means that if the Yorubas of Benins are descendants of Oduduwa, the Yorubas of Benins are not Yoruba people either way. So they are from Mecca. What we the Benins now need to do now, we need to contribute money. No, I want all the Benin people now to contribute money and give to me. I would like to travel to Mecca, because that's what Samuel Johnson said. I would like to travel to Mecca to go and look for our father Oduduwa in Mecca. Since that's what Samuel Johnson said. It is also in the 60s, the same time the Benin people started to publicly counter the works of Jacob Egarewa, was also the same time the Yorubas started to counter the works of Samuel Johnson. In the 60s, the writers like Professor Akinjogbe was the guy who came up with the Okiora that Oduduwa hailed, came from Okiora. Yeah, our papa did from Mecca. Make una find small money. I'm going to Mecca. Yes, because that's what they said, that whatever Jacob Egarewa wrote is absolutely correct, that every other thing that the Benin historians wrote amounts to revisionism. Okay, we now agree. Yes, we agree. Whatever Egarewa wrote is correct. Then whatever Samuel Johnson also wrote is also absolutely correct. Every other thing that any other Yoruba historians wrote is absolutely wrong. If they agree to theirs, we will agree to our own. But at the same time that the Benin historians started to publicly, in the 30s, in the late 30s and in the 40s, the likes of their DN Oronsai was already seen publicly criticizing the work of Jacob Egarewa, but he could not publish his work. So until in the 60s, where late Amiwu published in one of the journals called a journal called Oduduwa, where he publicly countered what Jacob Egarewa. That is the same time the likes of Professor Akinjogbe also came out to also counter the works of Johnson, saying that Oduduwa came from Okiora, Ora Hills. But what is not authentic about it is that within the sphere of the Yoruba scholars, the likes of Obayemi, Professor Obayemi, also countered what Professor Akinjogbe wrote, referring to Oduduwa as a myth-historical plane, that it doesn't exist beyond the myth-historical plane. So, in other words, he sees that everything that the Yorubas were trying to co-opt, not even the Yoruba now, the Ife historians, they were Ife-centric. The Ife-centric historians was the one who was favoring the Okiora concept, while the Samuel Johnsons were the one who favored the Oyo concept. Alright? These are the people who are not saying that these are the people who had disparities about their histories, now coming to tell we the Benin people that why should we counter Egarewa for writing some of the rubbish that he wrote. Alright? So the likes of the Obayemi countered, disagreed with the likes of Professor Akinjogbe. Professor Akinjogbe begins to sell the idea that he came from the Okiora Hills, but the one of the most interesting parts of that lie that Professor Akinjobi told was that it is a fact that 16 communities makes Ife. 16 communities makes Ile-Ife. 16 communities makes Ile-Ife. Before Professor Akinjobi in the 60s started to write that Oduduwa emerged from Okiora, none of these 16 communities that formed Ile-Ife claimed Oduduwa, that Oduduwa came from any of these communities. So, what happened? You will never find it anywhere where it was written prior before 60s that anybody said anywhere was written, or there was an oral account that said that Oduduwa came from the Okiora Hills. Some of the Ife-centric historians started to postulate into the 60s. And funny enough, none of the 16 communities that makes Ile-Ife claimed the ownership of Oduduwa. So, when he came to Ile-Ife, when he arrived at Ile-Ife, there is no community. It's just like if, for example, we have a story that Oduduwa descended from heaven to Benin Kingdom. Of all the communities, about the 33 communities that makes up of the old Benin city, no one will claim that Oduduwa came from any of these communities. Alright? 16 communities making Ile-Ife, none of them prior before 1960 had any account, any historical account, any oral account that claimed that Oduduwa came from any of these 16 communities. Until one guy, who is one of the biggest revisionists, no, they are calling us revisionists, came up and postulated Okiora so that to push the Ife-centric history. These are the same people that are not telling us that what Igarewa wrote must be forced down on us because Igarewa was the first historian. Yet they don't want to agree that the Oduduwa came from Mecca, as according to what their own first historian also wrote. So we're going to call a spade a spade. There is no amount of you guys threatening me. Even the guy was so keen. He even know my village. The guy yesterday that was arguing with me that called himself Oromi Odede. The guy opened more than 10 accounts to blackmail, to force his history on me. Izoduwa doesn't even know that these people exist. They are the one that saying that nobody knows Izoduwa exists. But Izoduwa does not have any other account other than Imasuen Amowie Izoduwa. That's the only account I have. I don't hide behind the shadows. People can see my face. I don't hide behind the shadows. I don't go to Yoruba platforms to say whatever they are saying is wrong. It is not my business. They are saying that we are revisionists. They are saying that we are the one who is lying. They are saying that what they have said is the truth, but they get threatened slightly when Izoduwa begins to say some certain things. Why do you get threatened? Izoduwa is not threatened by whatever lies or whatever propagandas you guys have been blowing for all of these years. But what Izoduwa is doing is to ensure that he publicly counters you people as best as he can. Alright? So, what is now the problem? According to him, nobody gives a heck about Izoduwa, but Izoduwa does not go to any of the Yoruba platform. Ever. Has never. Even if you tag me, I read it and I just walk past. It's not my business. I don't fucking care. Alright? But the guy who doesn't exist, you trouble him. You come to his inboxes. Sometimes you come to his WhatsApp. You do all manner of blackmails. Let's talk about Igarewa, Jacob Owade Igarewa. Jacob Owade Igarewa was born in 1893. Jacob Owade Igarewa was born in 1890 in Idwani, close to Akure, present-day Ondo State. That's where he was born. He didn't come to Benin until probably in the year 1914, where he came to Benin. He attended St. Matthew's before he left to Okigwe in present-day Port Harcourt, and returned back in about 1921. All right, he was fascinated by the history of the Edo people. So he started to do documentaries, begin to bring oral accounts together. Then in the year 1933, he made a breakthrough. He published the first indigenous work, and it was titled Ehere Vitendo. Ehere Vitendo. That work was published in the year 1933. That work was an instant hit because it was the first indigenous writer of the Benin history. So it was an instant hit. It was a sold out. In 1934, a reprint was made on Ehere Vitendo. Then in 1936, it was translated by the CMS to English. All right, translated as Short History of Benin. It's the same thing. Ehere Vitendo, when you translate it to English, is Short History of Benin. Ehere Vitendo, history, Itan. Ehere, short, Edo, Benin. Ehere Vitendo, Short History of Benin. So it was translated by the CMNs in 1936. Then that was the first edition. So that gets it very clearly. The first edition has the Benin edition and the translated edition. So the Benin edition published 1933 and the translated edition published 1936. These were the two. These are first editions. The first edition is broken down into two. The Benin edition, which was published 1933, and the translated edition, which was published 1936. All right. Then the second edition was published 1953. The third edition was published 1960, and the fourth edition was published 1968. Now, in 1957, he was already blind. He was blind in the year 1957, 4 years after he had published his second edition. 4 years after he had published his second edition. Like I said, his first edition was published in 1933, translated in 1936, the same edition. But the second edition, which is a revised and elaborate edition, was published in 1953. Third edition was 1960, and fourth edition was 1968. All right, he died in 1980, as a matter of fact. I want us to get it very clearly. Because there are some certain things I want to establish. All right. In the first edition, whether the Benin version or the translated version, the second edition, the third edition, and the fourth edition, nowhere, I challenge anybody, nowhere that Igarewa wrote. We have the first edition. I have the first edition, both the Benin and the translated one. We have the second edition, we have the third edition, we have the fourth edition. Nowhere did Igarewa wrote that Ekaranderan died at Uwoton. I've challenged them before now. He didn't write that Ekaranderan died at Uwoton. He said Ekaranderan lived. The time they were trying to retrieve Ekaranderan, and after many successive attempts to retrieve Ekaranderan from Uwoton, they left him. So he did not say what happened after which to Ekaranderan. He did not say anything. So, but these Yoruba historians are saying, these Yoruba propagandists are saying on social media space that Ekaranderan lived and died at Uwoton. You now ask them to snap a page of Igarewa's work, Jacob Wade Igarewa's work, wherefore he said that Ekaranderan died at Uwoton. In some intelligent report that Bradbury had, he had it in a very good, the Bradbury's intelligent report had revealed that Ekaranderan was seen at Okada and was later to seen to establish a Yorùbá community. When you die at Uwotan, you cannot go and find or create another community when you die at Uwotan. But Ekaranderan is the founder of a Yorùbá community. We have landmarks. We have historical landmarks to see the route at which Ekaranderan traveled. All right, we have historical landmark. We have historical landmark to prove that Ekaranderan had lived Uwotan by establishing communities, by staying a while at Okada and establishing a community at Era in present-day Uhonde local government. The histories are there. These people can take their pompous and deceiving self and bring it to the limelight. All right, now get all of this fact very straight. We understand the Yoruba background of Jacob Owade Ekaranderan because he was born and bred there until probably when he was about in 1940, when he was about I think 21 or so. That's when he came to Benin or so. I can't remember the date. All right, but it was in 1914 that he came to Benin, but he was born in 1893. All right, so when he came to Benin, he had already spent quite his teenage age in the Yoruba land. All right, he has spent quite his teenage age in Yoruba land. All right, so eventually he already had that Yoruba influence. But when he wrote the first book, the first work he wrote was called the Hiri Vitendo. That manuscript was read to Oduduwa Ekaranderan in 1930, before it was published in 1933. Now, this is what the first edition of that book wrote. All right, they are not going to tell you this, and probably they don't know. There are some changes. Professor Oyulawa Oswanlele did the comparison of Hiri Vitendo and first edition, translated first edition, second edition, third edition, and fourth edition of Igarewa's short history of Benin. So a lot of these people, because it's out of print, they don't have access to the first edition, either translated or the Benin version. In the first edition, Igarewa had made it very clearly that Oduduwa Ekaranderan was buried in Benin. Get it very clearly. I want to establish some very basic fact. He has said all the Obas of Benin were buried here in Benin. Oduduwa Ekaranderan started from Oduduwa Ekaranderan the first, was buried here in Benin at Usama Palace. That is what Igarewa wrote. But in the second edition that he published, that was published in 1953, he now said that all the Obas of Benin, starting from Oduduwa Ekaranderan, were being buried in Ile-Ife. I want people to understand. The first edition says that no Obas of Benin were buried in Ile-Ife. All the Obas of Benin were buried in Benin. That Oduduwa Ekaranderan was buried at Usaman Palace. But in the second edition, he now wrote that all Obas of Benin were being buried at Ile-Ife. That's the first point I wanted us to picture out. Why would he have changed the first one, knowing fully well that the first one that he wrote was vetted, but the second one that he published in 1953, he had already become an authority. Don't also forget, in one of his books, the autobiography of my life. The autobiography of my life. He had written that he had accompanied Oduduwa Ekaranderan II in 1937 to see in 1936 he had accompanied Oduduwa Ekaranderan II to see the Oni of Ife, and in 1937 he had accompanied Oduduwa Ekaranderan to see the Alafin of Oyo. So he was already missing with the Ife-centric historians. At a point in time, he became an historian of the Ile-Ife people. He was more or less an historian of Ooni Aderemi. From there, they started to influence him, and when he published his 1953 edition, some of the things he had originally written, the raw Egarewa, was sidelined, and some foreign ideas started to creep into his work. Some foreign ideas started to creep into the work. While this series of history was going on, he published other two books. One was published in 1954, The Origin of Benin. The other one was published in 1956, Benin Titles. Origin of Benin was published in 1954, a book. And another one was published in 1956, another book called Benin Titles. In the 1954, The Origin of Benin, Egarewa had said that the Benin people migrated from Egypt. On our way from Egypt, we branched at Sudan. After some time at Sudan, we followed through Ile-Ife before we got to Benin. That was the account that he wrote on The Origin of Benin. But in 1956 edition, the same author, he wrote in Benin Titles that the Benin people came in three waves. He said one was the Nupe wave, the other one was the one from Egypt, and the other one was from the one from Ile-Ife. These are contrasting facts that crept into Egarewa's work. Egarewa was certainly confused as to what to do with the origin. First, he had been preempted by the infant-centric historians, and now he started to have an influence from his later mentors like Percy Amowie Talbot. From his later books like Percy Amowie Talbot, who was one of the chief propounder of the Hamitic hypothesis that everything that has to do with any civilization has to come from Egypt. So in all of these things, there were complications. There were complications that we cannot give a blind spot to as to the consistencies of Egarewa's history as that he documented. Like I said, Dion Oronsayo was one of his contemporaries at that time. I challenged Egarewa in the 1940. Dion Oronsayo, on his preface of his book, The History of Benin Kingdom and Empire, Dion Oronsayo's work, probably one of these days, maybe in our next class on Sunday, I'm going to read the preface. And also stated that he had challenged Egarewa on the preface of that book, that he had challenged Egarewa for writing the way he wrote in the 40s. And don't also forget that Egarewa was also an Ugboni member, a Yoruba court group. Don't also forget, he was rewarded for some of his dirty jobs that he did to Benin history. He was given an honorary degree in the University of Ibadan. We cannot give blind spot for him doing this. But in all of this, they are unable to state in the series of the short history of Benin, wherefore the Egarewa has stated that Ekaranderan died at Uwoton. So, if Egarewa was not very certain, as important figure as Ekaranderan, he did not expatiate on the history of Ekaranderan. Why didn't he expatiate the heir apparent who eventually left the land and went to settle at Uwoton? He did not say anything about him. He didn't say what happened to him. They are not saying that he said that he died. Let them show you the pages of Egarewa's a series of short history of Benin, whether he wrote that Ekaranderan died at Uwoton. And like I've said, I've established some routes and landmarks that he couldn't, even if you had said that he died at Uwoton, how did he now want to establish communities like Iraq? How did he now, even in the book, in the second edition, he had said something about a Ekaranderan. How can someone of that magnitude, whose a day was named after him, could have forgotten and no history was ever written or documented about him? These are some issues. These are scholarly issues that were presented. That you cannot say that because Egarewa wrote, Jacob Uwadea Egarewa wrote, he was the first historian, and from the 40s he was already being counted. But only that, these people had no avenue to publish their works until in the 60s, where the first person who who openly, the first person to publish. It's not as if it wasn't countered right from the 30s. It was countered. But the first person to publicly publish a work was Amiwu. Before the likes of Eyari, before the likes of Osemege, even the likes of this Epa that just died recently, His Royal Highness Edwin Akenzwa, in late 70s and the early 80s, started to counter his work. That what he wrote was completely false. This was not the likes of Professor O.S.B. America in the 80s. This was not the works that really defines our history. Alright? And now they are not telling us that we shouldn't believe. Don't also forget, in the second edition, Egareva had said, listen very well, I want people to pay attention, that Egareva had said that there were only 12 Ogisos. He had listed 12 Ogisos. But in his works he later published, he turned that moment in 1957, the autobiography of his life. He agreed that there were 31 Ogisos, but he didn't publish it. He only published the first edition, he published 12. In the second edition, he upped it a little bit, because people started to question his work, that there are not 12 Ogisos, there are 31 of them. But he didn't publish that there were 31 Ogisos, but in his autobiography, he turned that moment, he agreed that there were 31 Ogisos, but he had little or no information about quite a lot of them. He also said in that second edition that 2 of the Ogisos were female. But later historians proved, having more superior knowledge, had proved that these people couldn't have been female Ogisos. So because Egareva said that Emose and Ororo were female Ogisos, then we the Benin people should believe without proper verification. Having undergone several other scrutiny and proper verification, we discovered that these 2 Ogisos were not female. How can a pamphlet, maybe probably you guys have not seen the short history of Benin, a pamphlet, a book that is less than 150 pages or so, represents the entire history. The history of Obaiwa alone. This is a snippet. This is a snippet of Obaiwa's, the history of Oli Obaiwa. It's almost twice bigger than Egarewa's short history of Benin. Twice bigger. So they are not saying that Egarewa's small book, this book is about 189 pages. Alright? And it was only written for Ey the Great, the first. Then they are not saying that a book that is twice half of this should represent the entire history of a land. Ni azar awagbon. What is true? What is true? I guess I give you facts. You can go and verify. Jacob Owadia was an Ogboni man. Some of the things that he wrote was written in favor of them. Alright? His group, eventually the group he had, D.N. Oronsaye and the likes of Humphrey Omosage groups metamorphosed into what we call Otwedo. Then the group that was catalyzed by Jacob Owadia Egarewa metamorphosed into a party that became Ancient Group. So he was a pro-Yoruba minded person. You can take that from him. From all of the statistics that I've given. Someone who wrote in his original script that Obaiwa Ekaranderan the first was buried here in Benin, eventually in second edition went to change everything, saying that the Obas of Benin were being buried in Ile-Ife. Why? Why did he change that historical account? And you will now say that the Benin people should swallow all his fallacies, some of his fallacies, because he did an incredible job. Outside the series of a short history of Benin, he went further to publish 32 other books. 32 other books. Outside the series, he went further to publish about 32 other books. So, to an extent, it became the base at which every other historian quoted from. But some parts that were not true were rightly countered when the likes of Aroyi Bradbury had told Egarewa that the Ogisos were how did Bradbury put that word? It's sort of a semi-historical personalities. Like if they were not, the story of the Ogisos were shredded in myths that they might not have existed. Egarewa stood his ground and said that the Ogisos existed, only that the information that they had, was not sufficient. The information that he had about the Ogisos were not sufficient enough. He went further to say, in his second edition, that one of the greatest disservice to the Benin history was because of Ugoro. All right, one of these days I'm going to look for that extract and probably post it. He had said that the Ugoro at the time when the second dynasty came, they all left the central Benin and went to establish their various communities. So I've always been telling you people the function of the Ugoron people. One of the greatest disservice was the Ugoron people that was used to preserve our history right from the days of the Ogisos. At one point in time, I don't know what happened. That momentum, that group was not sustained. The Ugoron guild. And that's what exactly Izoduwa have been doing, trying to sustain the original ideas of the Ogisos. That's why I enshrine the context of Ugoron. And a lot of people feel bad about it. So with so much historical fact, Egarewa was a sold out. And if we're going back to Yoruba, Samuel Johnson said they came from Mecca, that Oduduwa came from Mecca. So Oduduwa, there is no how any Yoruba person is going to say it. Oduduwa is not a Yoruba man. If you come from Mecca, you cannot be Yoruba. And that is the context that we have been saying. If you come from Mecca, you can't be a Yoruba. If you fall from heaven and go and meet an already existing people, you cannot come from them. Where you are not born from, you can't be an indigene of them. He wasn't born from there. They can prove it. They can't prove that he was born from there. So that means he was originally not an Ife indigene. So how come they are not saying that the Obas of Benins, who is a direct descendant of Oduduwa, is a Yoruba person? So it's even better for them to be able to say that Oba Benin is from Mecca. Because that's where some of the earliest Yoruba historians said that Oduduwa came from. So it's better to even say that the Obas of Benin are from Saudi Arabia. So I'm more rest of the matter. You understand? So let's start up. Understand these deceptive characteristics of these people. They're very cunning-minded, and yet they say that we are revisionists. When the revisionism of them started up in 1960, when the likes of Akinjogbe started to say that the guy came from Okiora Hills. And when you come from Okiora Hills, there are surrounding communities around the Okiora Hills. Like I said earlier, 16 communities makes Ile-Ife. Of all the 16 communities, no community till now has been able to come out that out of these 16, now we get to Oduduwa. It's not there. Therefore, what does that tell you? It tells you that the guy is not from any of the 16 communities. If he's not from any 16 communities, so he couldn't have been an indigene of Ile-Ife. And there's never been any history predating the 60s that has said that Oduduwa came from the Okiora. It was only being promoted when they discovered that what Samuel Johnson said will affect deeply the history of the Yoruba people. So they started to come up with this Ife-centric ideology. It's sort of, they are more like two schools of Yoruba history. The ones that favor Oyo and the ones that favor Ife. These are the same people saying that we are confused, that we're revisionists. These are the same people. The same people that when Oyo historians write, the Ife people will disagree. When the Ife write, the Oyo people will disagree. So when these Akinjogbe, the Ife-centric historians, like the Akinjogbe, the Akintoye, when they started to also write theirs, it was different from the likes of the ones that Samuel Johnson wrote. The likes of the Obayemi disagreed. The guy was just neutral. He seems the only guy that has a plausible historical record. He actually told them that this Oduduwa you guys are saying came from Okiora, from Mecca. It seems like this guy is not from here. He said Oduduwa does not exist beyond the myth-historical plane. It is not an actual indigene. It is not a son of this land. That is what Obayemi, their own son, told them. It is the same Obayemi that questioned that the Ile-Ife that is in Osun State. I quoted him when I did my documentary that made them went mad about 2 years ago about Uhe. Also, it was the same Obayemi that said that he questioned the originality of this present day Ile-Ife and said that the original Ile-Ife, all that Ile-Ife owns to, where Ile-Ife drew their relevance from, has been dismissed in favor of Ile-Ife. It is the same Obayemi. It's the same Obayemi. So let's call a spade a spade. You said we revised Jacob Owade Agarewa's work. We agree. Just like the way you people also revised Samuel Johnson's work. Otherwise, Samuel Johnson says that the Oduduwa came from Mecca. If Oduduwa came from Mecca, it means that the Obas of Benin came from Mecca and they are not Yoruba. Either way, it's a win-win for us. The most important thing is that over the years we've been able to prove one fact is indelible in all of these arguments. One fact is indelible in all of this argument is that Oduduwa is not a Yoruba person. There is no how you guys are going to use all the techniques of lie to claim that guy. I know you guys will never agree that he came from Benin. At what still, if you say he didn't come from Benin, but he's not a Yoruba person? That's the point we're saying. The worst that will agree is that everyone agrees, most of the recent Yoruba historians agrees that Oduduwa is not a Yoruba person. So if Oduduwa is not a Yoruba person, what that makes Oba Benin a Yoruba man? Even in the first work, in the second edition of Short History of Benin, when Egarewa was referring to the Igbesama Guild, he made mention of the Igbesama Guild that the founder of Igbesama Guild came from Ile-Ife with Oromia. But in his third edition, he now said that no, that the founder of Igbesama Guild was already existing, not the founder now, that Igbesama Guild was already existing in the days of Ogisoye. I don't know whether you guys are understanding this inconsistency. In the second edition, that wrote that the founder of Igbesama Guild accompanied Oromiyan from Ile-Ife. But in his third edition, he now agreed that no, that was a mistake, that the Igbesama Guild was already existing in the days of the Ogisos. With all these seemingly inconsistencies in the work, then you are now saying that we, the Benin people, should now say, since he's the first person he wrote well, but the lies, we cannot correct him. from his obvious mistakes, from his obvious lies. So you come from Mecca. Saudi Arabia is a very rich country. They should let's go and look for our father in Mecca. This country, this Nigeria country, is not even a good country. The Benin people need to relocate to Mecca. since that's where Oduduwa came from, and we are children of Oduduwa. Let us, including a lot of the Yoruba people who also came from Oduduwa. Let's leave this country together. Let's go and look for our father in Mecca. And no wonder Yoruba people, they go. Now, which country they go pilgrimage? Not be Mecca, they go pilgrimage. The pilgrimage. Anyway, okay. Some other don't change. I understand. No. Oduduwa from Mecca, from Benin. No. You don't understand. Amade. You just came inside the program. So I'm saying, according to Yoruba, they said Oduduwa came from Mecca. That's what the first historian wrote. Alright? But you know, those are not true. The truth is that Oduduwa came from Benin. Alright? But let's assume we agree to their context that, okay, actually Oduduwa actually came from Mecca, because according to them, I'm quoting from them, I'm using their own statement against them now. According to them, they say because Egarewa, who was the first indigenous Benin writer, wrote that the Benin Oromian came from Ile-Ife, Oduduwa was a Yoruba person, it therefore means that the Obas of Benin are Yoruba persons. And because Egarewa, who was the first writer, Benin indigenous writer, because of that, we cannot dispute him. Even whatever he says is right. So every other thing that every other successive Benin historians wrote are revisionism, they are not correct. Yeah, Asona said that the first Yoruba historian was Samuel Johnson. He published his work in 1921. It's everywhere. Alright? So, and he also said that Oduduwa came from Mecca. So, because of the fact that he said that Oduduwa came from Mecca, that makes Yoruba people come from Mecca, or Oduduwa came from Mecca. So, every other Yoruba historians like Obayemi, Akinjogmi, Akintoye, and all of the likes, and Etal, I don't know how to speak that. Whatever they also wrote outside what Samuel Johnson is also lies. It's also revisionism, and we should not also agree to read. That's what I'm saying. Alright? You understand? So, these are facts. They say that Egarewa, in short history, the short history of Benin, wrote that Ekaranderan died at Ugoton. Let them show you yesterday or this morning rather, I went to the Institute for Benin Studies. I checked first edition, Ihiri Written to published 1933, the translated edition 1936. I checked second edition, I checked fourth edition. In all of these editions, I did not see where Egarewa wrote in short history of Benin that Ekaranderan died at Ile-Ife, died at Ugoton. They also said that Lingrot, when he published his work in 1903, Great Benin Customs and Oral, what's the title of that book again? Also said that Ekaranderan died at Ile-Ife, died at Ugoton. Completely lie. Let them snap the page and send to you. He never said that. Alright? He never said that. I said, I've always known the guy to be Oswald. So he never said that. If he said that, let us snap the pages and send to you. Let us send the pages and send to you. No. Oh, okay. This is what my brother said. He said there was on the. He said that the concept of Oduduwa coming from Mecca was as a result of the force. Was forced on. I think I didn't get that clearly again. That's what he said, that that Mecca story was forced. Just like Egariwa forced his story on us. Egariwa forced his story on us. So, if you think that Samuel Johnson's works was forced on the Yoruba people, the Benin people also think that Jacob Wade Egariwa forced his own story on us. So, if it is good for the geese, it's also good for the gander. So, if what Samuel Johnson wrote about the Yoruba people was inaccurate, and the later Yoruba scholars or historians wanted to make an amendment to read, can't we also make amendment to our own when we saw that it was false? Otherwise, otherwise the Yoruba will stick to Samuel Johnson, then we'll stick to Egariwa. So that's what we are saying. You debunk your own, you don't want us to debunk our own. It's out of foolishness. Alright? So these are the contexts at which we must begin to put these things in proper perspective. These are the contexts we begin to put these things in proper perspective. And that's what we have said. And that's what we've said. So let nobody deceive anybody. From in the 40s, the works of Egariwa was already being contested by the likes of Dian Oronsaye, which he wrote in the preface of his book, The History of Benin Kingdom and Empire. He wrote in the preface of the book that he challenged Egariwa as far back as late 30s and early 40s. But he didn't have the instrument, because that book was published in 1976. He didn't have the instrument to publish it until later he will publish his own in the late 60s, titled Oduduwa, where he countered Egariwa. That was the same time the likes of Professor Akinjogmi were also countering Samuel Johnson. They said we should forget our own. They said we should forget our own and stick to their own. I've never seen people as cocky, arrogant as these people in terms of history. You want to tell us our history? And when we tell you your own history, you frown. What nonsense. We said the Ekaranderan did not die at Ugoton. You said he died, that Egariwa wrote it in the history of, short history of Benin. Then we said, bring it out where he wrote it. You're unable to write it. But you want people to believe. You also went to say that Lingrod said that Ekaranderan died. And we said that. Is it not Lingrod? The book is everywhere. That he never said so. That if he said so, Please kindly snap and send. So let's keep history the way it is. None of you Yoruba people has any right to threaten Izoduwa. Because first, when you guys are doing your foolish, mumushous lies on your pages, on your whatever Yoruba historical pages, Izoduwa, you can never see Izoduwa there. It doesn't concern me. What I've always believed, according to the speech delivered by Oduduwa II on the day of his coronation, it is not, he said, and I quote, it is not in our place to force our history on our neighbors. It is not. It is not in our place. We have our own history to tell. You have your own history to tell. Yes, Oduduwa gave birth to Oromia, or was his grandson, however you guys put it, and he came to Benin. Yes, that Oduduwa, you people gave us Oba, but that Oduduwa, that grandfather of the Oba you people gave us, is our son too. Talk your own. We talk our own. Then you now said that we should bring facts. Then you said that when you said we should bring facts, we brought facts. We brought facts. Physical remnants of fact. That if you said Ekaranderan died Uwoton, Ekaranderan went to establish a Rua. He couldn't have died at Uwoton and founded a Rua. Or is it the Obas of Benins that went to put different people at a Rua and brainwashed all the people in a Rua and told them that from now henceforth, anybody that asks you the story who founded the Rua, tell them Ekaranderan. Is it that we brainwashed the Rua people? The Rua community people is still there till date as we want them. The community Ekaranderan founded after he left Uwoton. So he couldn't have died at Uwoton and now he ghost. Oh, okay. Okay, he also made Oduduwa out of clay. And that is factual, Prince Oge. That is factual. I didn't want to go there because I was very angry yesterday because the way they take beat man you yesterday, it got me really pissed. I didn't want to go there when it was strange. There is also another established fact by the Gala people that the Ekaranderan came to Igala land. The Benins couldn't have also gone to bribe the Igala people to tell them that story. It is in the canals of the Igala history, well recorded, how one of our princes came there before he left to Ife. So they are saying that bring fact. The fact you do not have is that you cannot tell where Oduduwa came from. But we can tell that Ekaranderan had lived Uwoton. Let's say Ekaranderan died and was buried at Uwoton. Where was he buried? Let them go to Uwoton and ask those people at Uwoton and said that whether Ekaranderan was buried there or died there. Oh, the Obas of Benin also went to brainwash them, or the Benin people went to brainwash them and tell them anytime that your story of Uwoton is being told, please tell them that Ekaranderan did not die here. Okay, that's even your grandmother's village. But Estabami, I'm sure that if you call home and ask, Gomano Buerua, at Erua, their primary school, is it the primary school? I think the secondary school in Erua is called the Ekaranderan Secondary School. At Okada is Ekaranderan Primary School. At Erua is a secondary school, either the primary or the secondary school. It's named after Ekaranderan until date. And the colleges of worshippers that he took. I challenged the guy yesterday that didn't you know that the reason why Olokun is not a religion, is not a deity practice in all over Yoruba land, only practiced by the Ile-Ife people, is because there is a connection. I told them that Olokun has nothing to do with Yoruba. It's a Benin divinity that the Ekaranderan took from Benin to Ile-Ife. And I told him that that's a route I've been able to establish a foundation because even the Lingrod quoted it that he had a malakun. We couldn't pronounce olokun, just like I couldn't pronounce Ekaranderan. I call it Kaladeson. Alright, in the old English, there was no letter K. At the time Lingrod wrote it, there was no letter K. Letter K was, a C was used in replacing letter K at the time those Lingrod wrote it. And don't even forget, it was not even Lingrod that wrote it. Lingrod followed the report of Syrian Punch. Lingrod that wrote that book published in 1903 did not come to Benin. He didn't know whether Benin existed or not. It was a report one of his brother who was killed in Benin during the invasion 1897. The journal that he had was what Lingrod used in writing that book, used in publishing that book. Alright, then I was able to establish that it was a Ekaranderan that took Olokun to Ife. Then I challenged him again that you tell us how Olokun came to Benin. If you said it's an Ife thing, how did Olokun come to Benin? You completely wrong. I've done an extensive research. I've done an extensive research that concerns Benin and Ingala relationship. It is part of their extant history. It is part of their extant history of documenting Ekaranderan coming through their land. When the documentary that will be titled Ekaranderan, when I will start the project, then you will know if it was true or not. So they didn't know of Ekaranderan, but they know that the wife he married, the name of the wife that Ekaranderan married when he was at Igala. So these are extensive. So let's not you don't want to believe our own part of our history. You want us to believe your own history? What nonsense. So anyway, I've said all that I have said. I thank all of you. I'm rounding up now. If there are one or two questions, let me take. Then let me conclude. So tomorrow is on Monday. I need to go and relax my head. To go and relax. Anyway, okay. In absence of question, I think I've done extensive in absence of question. So in absence of question, I will take my leave. I thank all of you for joining us for today's segment. I guess after this, we'll talk some more. I remember I told someone that why would the ancestor sorry, my mouth not good sometimes though. See, my mouth not good sometimes. I said that the ancestor nice strike Jacob Owade. That's why he quit blind at his age in 1957. Say that man. So anyway, this my man will not kill me. See this one, 4-0 Zaga. Sorry. Anyway, I'll see you guys next week Sunday. So why I will say so Oba talk well. You say.